All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our pep talk. Wednesday, December 18th, 2019, heading into the holidays. Today we're coming from corporate headquarters for Team Parents Estate Planning in Acton, Massachusetts. Very often I'm doing this from my kitchen island, so sometimes you see a different background. This morning we're talking about something that I think is particularly apropos for this time of year, when families are together and celebrating holidays, and that is the concept of story and legacy in estate planning. And here's something that most people don't think about when they think about estate planning, and that at its core, estate planning is a way to help you to preserve and protect the stories that are important to you. All of us have a story. All of us as individuals have a story, who we are and what's important to us. Our families have a story, how we grew together and the things that we've done together. And estate planning at its core is deciding what about your story or what about your family's story is worth preserving and protecting, and then building a plan to preserve and protect those most important parts of our story. So when we have young kids, part of our story, part of our family story is who we are as parents, who our kids are as children, and what's important about our ongoing family story. And so preserving and protecting the part of that story when your kids are young is making sure that there are people to raise them the way that we want them to be raised. That is preserving that family story. When your kids are older and that's not as important, and maybe how your family is going to inherit and deal with everything that you've accumulated during your lifetime, all the wealth that you've accumulated, the story shifts to what's important about what we've accumulated. How do we want our family to use that money even after we're gone? It might be that you have a vacation home in the family, and part of preserving the family story is making sure that that vacation home remains available to your kids, to your grandchildren, in the family, because that's where the story was written. That's where the memories were made. And preserving that is an important component of the estate plan and an important part of preserving that story. So part of helping families to preserve their stories and protect their stories is actually capturing the stories. And in our office, we do that through our legacy interview. It's kind of a unique piece of estate planning. Not a lot of traditional estate planners do this, mostly because they just don't take the time to think through what's most important, truly what's most important to their clients. They take what they've learned about traditional estate planning over the years and they keep applying that. And for a long time, admittedly, I did that too, until I discovered just how important the legacy piece was, the preserving of the story piece was. And I truly, truly grasped it completely when my wife Paula and I did our own legacy interview and started to capture the story of our family and what was most important to preserve and protect for our daughters. And so I just want to, before I talk more deeply about the legacy interview and kind of what that looks like and how it works, I just want to share an experience from my life about why preserving these stories is so important. And if you think about it deeply, it all makes sense. As I always say to clients, you know, the money that you leave behind for your kids, at some point, it'll be gone. It'll be spent. It'll be done with. But the piece of you that you leave behind forever is the thing that your kids want the most, that your grandchildren will want the most, that your family will want the most. That's the piece that lives on forever. And we'll talk in a little bit about how we do that, how you can do that. But I want to tell you the story about my two grandmothers, because I think it helps to understand how story can fit into the overall planning picture. So my maternal grandmother has a fascinating story of how her family came to the United States. My paternal grandmother also has a fascinating story of how her family came to the United States, different time, And both of my grandmothers left a story for their children, for their grandchildren, and ultimately for their great-grandchildren. They left it in different ways, though. My maternal grandmother, whom I was very, very close to, the story of how her family came to the United States at the beginning of the 20th century, early 1900s from Eastern Europe, was all captured in writing. When my grandmother was much older, my sister encouraged her, cajoled her, finally got her to write down the family story. And it was done, as it turned out, not long before her death, because she died unexpectedly, but she got the story down in longhand. And then after my grandmother died, my sister transcribed that story and basically turned it into a family book. And the story is fascinating, and it's funny, and it's interesting. And I still pick it up from time to time when I come across it, and we'll read through the whole thing. When Paul and I were helping my parents clean out their house over the summer, the book appeared kind of out of nowhere. And when I was at the house, there it was on the coffee table. I sat down and I read through the story again. But it's in writing. That's all we have is a writing. What I really wish I had was that same story told by my grandmother in her voice. Because when I read the story, I can hear it in her voice, because I remember her voice. She died well into my adulthood when my oldest daughter was just a baby. But my oldest daughter and my younger daughter, who never met my grandmother, can't hear that story in her voice and then miss the opportunity of hearing my grandmother tell the story as only my grandmother could. My other grandmother did preserve her story in a recording that I never knew about until after she died, and really after my father died. And after my father died, when my stepmother was kind of cleaning things out, I think she came across this CD, which had the recording of my paternal grandmother on it, and sent it to me, and maybe sent it to my sisters, I'm not sure. But just out of the blue one day, a package arrived in the mailbox, and I opened it up, and there was a note and a CD, and I forget what the note said, but the next time I was in the car, I popped the CD in, and it was 45 minutes of my stepmother interviewing my grandmother at a time, I'm assuming it was not long before my paternal grandmother died, and she lived into her early 90s. And it was a part of my grandparents' story that I never knew. It was the story of my grandmother and my grandfather dating, my grandfather courting my grandmother, about how they would go down to the boardwalk at the Jersey Shore, and my grandmother would play the ukulele. And it was just I knew my grandparents, as everybody knows their grandparents, as older people. And I never knew the story of my grandparents as younger people. But there it was. There was a whole part of the family story that I really never knew and no one had ever told before. But now we have that. And it's in a digital recording, so it can last forever. So I can listen to it over and over again. I can hear my grandmother's voice again. I can hear the story as she would tell it, and not just words written on a piece of paper. And my kids can hear the story from my grandmother, even though they never knew her. So that's why I think preserving those stories is so important. And as I said before, your estate plan, the documents, are a tangible way to help you to preserve and protect the story. But as important, and in many ways I would say even more important, is capturing the stories, the guidance, the advice, all of the memories, all of your values, all of those things that are most important to you, all of those things that make you, you, all of those things that make your family, your family. The best way to preserve and protect that is to record it so that it can live on digitally for years, for decades, for generations, and that your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren or your great-great-grandchildren who don't exist and can't ever meet you will still have an opportunity to learn about your story, to hear your story. And so in our office, that's where the legacy interview comes in. It's part of every planning level that we make available in our office. So every client has the opportunity to participate in a legacy interview. We give them a safe space for them to tell their story. We do it in an interview format. It's recorded digitally. It's an audio recording. Theoretically, it could be a video recording, but we just do it as an audio recording, so there's not a lot of visual pressure associated with it. And it's just a way for me or for Emily, the other attorney in our office, to help clients to tell their story. And it's just easy to tell your story when it's done in an interview format, because there's lots of prompts along the way. Clients tell their story, we record that, we preserve it for them, we burn it onto what used to be a CD, we're moving over to USB drives for clients. We make the MP3 file available to them through our client portal, so they always have this audio recording that they can then leave behind for their kids, if their kids are still young, for their kids even when their kids are older, for their grandchildren, for their families, for their guardians who are taking care of their kids, for the people who are taking care of the money to take care of their kids. All of those things that are most important for them, all of those things that would be most important for you. There's lots of topics. When clients have young kids, we usually start with one called My Children or Our Children. You know, tell me about your kids, what you love about them, what makes you proud to be their parents, what is the guidance and the advice that you want to pass on to them, the life lessons you want to pass on to them, who have you named as guardians, what do you want them to know, who's going to take care of the money for your kids while your kids are young, what do you want them to know, what are the holidays and celebrations that are important in your family that you want to make sure your kids continue, who are the people that are important in your life that you want to be sure your kids maintain a relationship with, even if they're not family members. You know, for Paula and for me, there are a number of friends now that our kids are adults. We know that they would, but even when the kids were younger, I wanted them to know, here's the people that are important to mom and dad. Here's the people that we want you to stay in touch with. You know, my best friend from when I was 4 years old, who knows everything about my childhood. And that if either of my daughters needed to know a story about my childhood, if they went and talked to Lewis, Lewis would know the story. So when Paul and I did our legacy interview, this is when it really solidified for me how important this was. I knew the stories of my grandmothers. I knew what I wanted from them, but participating in the interview, doing it for ourselves, really helped me to deeply, deeply understand how important it was for us to share it, to kind of get it out there in the world and not to keep it just inside us, and how important it would be for our daughters to have those stories if for any reason we weren't there to tell them. Now, we always think that nothing's going to happen to us and we're going to have many, many years to share everything that's most important to us. But the reality is we don't always know what's going to happen. And so I think it is critically important to preserve those stories now when you're healthy, when you can, so that you can be sure that your families will always have those stories and those memories and those legacies if something were to happen. So that's our legacy interview. Again, this is the piece that makes us a little bit different from more traditional estate planning firms. We're different in a lot of ways, but I think this is the piece that for many people really sets us apart. It is the piece I love to do the most as the professional, as the planner, as the guide for my clients to help them to tell their stories. I love giving them the space to share. I love that they allow me to share that space with them. And they allow me to participate in whatever way in the preservation and the sharing of their stories. I learn something every time I do it. I've long lost count of how many times I've done these, how many interviews I've done. It's now hundreds, but that's not important. The important thing is every time I do it, I learn something. I learn something about being an individual, a person. I learn something about being a husband, a father, a son, a brother, because there's a lot of similarities in people's stories and there's lots of interesting differences. If that is interesting to you, if you're a client of ours, hopefully you've done your legacy interview. It's not mandatory, but we hope everybody does it. If it's been a while since you did your first, we could talk about coming back and doing more, as there is a library of legacy topics. There's one about your kids. There's one about just celebrations in your life. There is a topic on giving. I'm just looking at some of the topics about the meaning of money, about the meaning of success, about the importance of values. There's even a topic just called the year in review. And if you were doing one every single year, you might, at about this time of year, sit down, turn on a recorder and say, here's everything important that's happened in our lives in the last year. And you could start to build up a library, a legacy library of all of these things that are most important to you. So that's what I wanted to share with you all this morning, is the importance of story and the importance of preserving your legacy as part of your estate plan. As I said, we all have stories. We all like to share our stories. You know, when Paul and I did our legacy interview, that was, I always say to people, that was the coolest 45 minutes I've ever spent talking to and about my daughters ever. And, you know, until Paul and I update it for their adult years, it will remain the coolest 45 minutes I've ever spent talking about it. And every once in a while, I still pull it out to listen to it just to see, you know, what else I need to share with them while I'm still here. Before we wrap up, and I want to take some questions, and I should have mentioned this at the beginning, forgive me. I always, once I get going, I forget to do these things, but there's room in the chat box to post questions. So if you have any questions about anything I've said in the last 15 minutes, go ahead and post a question, and we can take a look at them and answer them before I go. I wanted to remind everybody that our holiday gift guide is available. A link to that holiday gift guide should be posted in the chat or the comments. So take a look for that. For the first 5 of you who download the family holiday gift guide, we've got a holiday gift for you, and that is the opportunity to come into our office and participate in our family wealth planning session at no cost. We usually charge for our family wealth planning session, our initial consultation. There's a lot of value in that meeting. You learn a lot about where you are and where you want to go, and what you don't know yet. We help you to know. And so you walk out knowing what you need to do, the decisions you need to make, the plan you need to put together. But for the first 5 of you who download that holiday gift guide, our holiday gift to you will be a no-cost family wealth planning session. So I hope you'll take advantage of that. Beyond our pep talk today, if you have any questions for our team, you can call the office here in Acton at 978-263-6900, 978-263-6900. Our team is here to talk to you, answer questions. They're terrific, and you'll really enjoy talking to them. If you want to get more information from our website, you can find us at parents, with an S, parentsestateplanning.com. Lots of frequently asked questions, lots of videos, lots of information. Log on there and wander around, and you'll get lots of information there. But I want to head into the questions in the chat box. The first question is, how do we decide what to talk about? I wouldn't know where to begin. Well, Marlena, that is why we have topics. And there's about somewhere between 20 and 25 different topics if I add them all up. So generally what we do for clients whose kids are not their first priority for this interview is send them the list of topics, and there's a little description under each of the topic. And then we let you kind of zero in on what's a topic that makes sense for you or resonates with you. And then we send you the questions within the topic so you can start to get prepared for your interview. Sometimes, you know, people will look at the list of topics and there'll be a couple that resonate with them, and we'll send the questions out for, you know, a few different topics, and that helps them to zero in and help them decide. So this is not something that you have to make up on your own, although you could. I can't think of a time a client did that, but I would be fascinated, and maybe I'll challenge any of our clients who are on the Pep Talk today to come up with your own questions. I would be happy to help you preserve your own questions, but you don't have to. We can help you to be thinking about the things to talk about. Let's see if there's any other questions. Okay, got it. Oh, do we do this on video? How is it recorded? In our office, it's audio recording only. No video, although I recognize it would be pretty simple for us to do a video recording. The reason I started as audio recording and I've continued to do it as audio recording, even as video recording has gotten much easier, and I've been doing this for about 11 or 12 years, is that I don't want there to be undue pressure in that interview. And I think sometimes if we were doing it as a video, I think there are some clients who would decline to do the interview because it's video. And what happens if I cry, or I don't, how do I look? And I wouldn't want my kids to see me that way or my family to see me that way. So we've just left it as an audio recording just to take some of that pressure off. And I think most clients are relieved actually that it's an audio recording and not a video recording. But it could be a video recording. And, as I say to clients, we're all walking around every day with audio recorders and video recorders in our purse and our pockets. And there isn't anything that stops us from pulling those recorders out at a moment's notice and recording things. And God knows our kids do it, right? All they do is snap photos and do videos. My kids are into TikToks right now, so that's the big thing. So you could do it. In our office, as I said, we do it as an audio recording just so there is no pressure. Let's see, any other questions? There is not. So I want to wrap this up because we are kind of at the end of our time. Is there a way to prepare for the interview? Very simply, if you're a client of the firm, we send you the questions ahead of time, and that gives you an opportunity to read through everything and make notes if you want to make notes, but at least to start to give some thought to the questions themselves. So you've got things that you want to accomplish in the interview. But yes, we send you the questions ahead of time, so that does not come as a surprise. So you can get prepared for that. All right, everyone, I want to wrap this up. Thank you all for joining me today. Whatever you are celebrating, I wish you happy, healthy celebrations, warm times with your families, sharing stories. Take care. We'll see you again in 2020. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.